Hi, and welcome to another webinar in the Masterful Manager series. Thank you for joining me today. My name's Alexandria Joy, or AJ, as most people know me now, and it's great to have you join me. Now, I know there are some people live on the call. I've just had a chat to them offline, and we're pumped for another great webinar series. So another series of 3 webinars all about how to master management and how to become more masterful in your own craft and to be developing continually as a human, because that's really what we want to be doing. So let's get underway. I always like to begin with a bit of an acknowledgement of the traditional owners of our land and also of the country that we're on. I love this image out of a cave, stolen from the internet, not my own image this time. But I do want to pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and not to make that sound like every welcome to country that you hear or acknowledgement of traditional landowners, but to truly acknowledge from the depth of my soul that these people know how to lead and manage. They have managed for thousands of years. They have been able to work with seasons to understand the laws of nature. They are able to communicate in ways that we have not yet mastered in many ways in organizations. And until we can start perhaps communicating along song lines between branches of our divisions of our businesses, I don't think we're there yet. So much to learn from the wisdom of our traditional land owners and the traditional elders of this beautiful land, Terra Australis. And for those of you who are listening in from other countries, please take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners in your nation as well. So, tonight, mastery. I love this Gretchen Rubin quote, which is what you do every day matters more than what you do once in a while. So this is kind of what tonight's call is going to be all around. And in this series of 3, we'll cover some different topics around mastery. But this first one is all around time and how we manage our time, how we look at what capacity we have, how we approach our way of thinking. And really, it's to start approaching and thinking about, do I have a fixed mindset or do I have a growth mindset? And not to make either good or bad, right or wrong. It's a bit like introvert, extrovert argument. We need both for different reasons. But I really want you to start thinking about, as a manager or leader or an emerging and developing manager or leader, what are my daily habits? What are the things that I do every day? And do I have a certain way of opening my emails? Do I have a certain way of greeting everyone in the morning? Have I got a rhythm or pattern for how I practice my meditation? Or, is there a certain way I run a meeting? So really to start thinking about, what are those daily habits and practices that I've formed? And perhaps even where did they come from? Because often we've fallen into that, or it's been that we're a product of our environment, our parenting, our boss or manager we've had before, the workplace we're in. So it can be really varied and different. And so I want you to start thinking a bit about that tonight, and really to think about habit stacking, or thinking about what are the most productive things that I can be doing and how can I start making them a daily practice, as opposed to, oh yeah, gee, it'd be nice to connect with stakeholders or communicate with my staff, and yeah, I'll do that once in a while. So how do I start doing some of these things in more of a routine way that require less cognitive energy, and start becoming just how I am being in what I do. So I'm going to reflect on, I introduced this model in the first webinar series, and if you haven't seen those, be sure to check out the link at the end of this presentation, and it will take you to the 3 recordings from the first series as well. But when we look at the value of a masterful manager, really just to recap very quickly, a masterful manager, and you can see in the second column, is able to start moving into flow. They're more likely to create vibrant cultures. The productivity that they achieve personally and through their people is more sustainable. and they tend to start loving their work themselves, as do others. And through the way that they're being, as well as what they're doing, they can have a 10 times impact. So, in the flip side of that, when we look at a micromanager, so someone that feels that they need to control and hold on to everything, then the energy that they have and usually their people have tends to flatline. It can be extremely depleting, if anything. Productivity can all but cease, and then it can start to slip. Um, People start to feel like they're losing the interest and their lack of engagement. So we start to experience presenteeism in workplaces. So that's where people show up, but you almost wish they didn't because they become black holes of energy. Um, and they're really just warming seats. They're not actually adding any real value. So that's when we start seeing toxic workplace cultures and environments. And we certainly don't want to dip down there, but it can happen. And in particular, if you look at the type of business that and culture that they start to create, down at the micro level, surprisingly for many people, is a more formal culture. They tend to be more rigid, they tend to be more structured, they like things done a certain way. And I know a couple of people on the call right now have worked for the government in various capacities. And so you often find a lot of formality in some of those. And it's not essentially how humans work well, or it's not how they thrive long term. It can work for a while, and it's very much of the industrial era and a time gone by. It's not necessarily what we want to see for the future of work. Above that, we see focused cultures, and they tend to be more cultures that are competitive. So focused by the means of they can actually, that can be a positive focus. We know where we're going and we're heading for a goal, but it can also flip very quickly into competition between staff members, people working too hard, too long. So we start getting burnout and all of those sorts of things. In the family culture, then people go, well, isn't that good? Don't we want it to be like a family culture? Well, yes and no. I mean, think about some of your aunts and uncles or cousins. Do you really want to be in workplaces with them every day? So family culture can be great in that there's this care for each other, a care and concern, and we're all in this together. So that can be really positive in a family culture. But then what can often happen is there starts to be a mum and a dad, there starts to be rules, and we're not allowed to flex our independence, and there's curfews and processes and policies put in place, right, to protect everyone because mum and dad get the last say. So not ideal as well if we really want to look for a growth mindset and an expansive creative business. So ideally, we're moving into that mastery of management, which can tend to create more of a freedom-based workplace. When we're masterful, we're able to bring out the best of our people, we're able to empower them and give them the freedom to do the right thing. A really great example of this recently, and I have been reading a book by them, which I've recommended before, is the latest book that's about the culture of Netflix. And in that, they really have a freedom-based culture. So much so that they got rid of their uniform policy, they got rid of their policy that is their travel policy, so that staff were just told, use your discretion, be an adult, and do what's in the best interests of Netflix. So they didn't have a, you can spend $32 on your dinner. They had a, please do what's in the best interest of Netflix, because you might be in a city where there's nothing else available, or, that's the only option for a meal. Well, if so, then buy that. So really treating their staff as independent thinkers, as freedom-based people, and as adults, and rewarding them for that. So ideally, that's the kind of business we all want to work in. And research pans that out. So the management mastery middle out model you'll be familiar with if you were on the first series of calls. And on the first series of calls, we really moved through the two middle circles here. So I believe management mastery is a middle out approach. We often think, I'll go to a training course and I'll do the stuff on the outside and, tick, I'm done. Well, it really is an inner game first. So we have to have the right mindset. And as I've just mentioned, we want to start moving towards a growth mindset. And a growth mindset, when you think about it, is where you're continually learning and improving, where you're looking for opportunities to do so, and you're not afraid to make mistakes. Whereas a fixed mindset often has come about since childhood. And you'll find people who at school, were afraid to show their parents their results if they didn't do well in something because they think, oh, I'm a failure, I'm bad. Or they tried something. And I've talked before about I tried 10-pin bowling once, right? And as a child, and was abysmal at it, and had a bit of a drama happen at it. And so after that, every year, whenever someone was having a party at 10-pin bowling, I'd say, no, I'm not going, and I refused. And that was a fixed mindset because I didn't look at, could I improve? Could it be fun? Could I enjoy it? And you will find, I'm sure you've worked with lots of people with fixed mindsets. This is how we've always done it. This is the way you do it. If I send you an email, you must reply. And within so many minutes, all right? People who have fixed mindsets about how everything should be. So we talked a lot about mindset. We then talked about minimalism and how you can strip away all the noise and the things that are cluttering up your space, your mind, your energy, the approach you have to the way you do your work. And lastly, what we're here to focus on for this whole series, all 3 calls will be on mastery. And this is starting to make a shift from self-focus because the inner 2 ones were really on getting that self right. And we'll still have a bit of that, but it's always with this edge of how can I be of more service. So a service mindset, or as I love the teachings of, and he's now passed on, but the beautiful writer Robert Greenleaf, who started servant leadership, who started the movement of that. There's a Servant Leadership Academy, and university in America. So, and lots of great books that he wrote, Robert Greenleaf. He talks a lot about servant leadership, and that's where we want to start moving if we're going to move into mastery. And that's starting to be more of a coach than a manager, more of a supporter and someone who empowers and helps others grow into their potential rather than just a timekeeper and someone saying, you need to do your 10 widgets today. So moving into mastery is really about starting to master self in order to serve others. So that's where we're moving from a lower frequency to a higher frequency. So let's begin with this topic of time and managing time, because everywhere I go and everyone I talk to says, I don't have enough time, right? And I hear it exit my lips from time to time as well. And, it's easy to understand why we may feel time pressured, and everything basically we do somehow relates to time. So I'd love you to hop on, anyone who is happy to turn your microphone back on. I know you're all muted, which is great to cut that background noise out, but I'd love to have a little bit of a chat right now with everyone about what are some of the ways that you or we as businesses and as professionals manage time. So what are all the things that we count, that we relate to time, that we look at time? How do we allocate time? So let's have a little chat. Who's happy to come on and talk to me?
Me, Alicia.
Hi, Alicia.
I think the first thing is priority, and then it's about experience of in a work situation of working out how you prioritize and why you prioritize.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the government environment that I've obviously worked in as well, and it's prioritizing whether you should do something because the minister's office wants you to do it, or because the general manager does it. So it's sort of understanding priorities, but it's also the experience that you get from doing it over years, and then making sure that you take time out to meditate, as you mentioned, but also to listen to webinars such as yourself, where you think about how you manage your time.
Right. So I'm hearing prioritizing because we only have so much time and we have to look and go, I could do all these things, so what's priority? Correct? Is that what you're sort of suggesting there?
Yes, but coupled by experience of how to manage time.
Yeah, and so by experience, can I explore that a bit with you? Do you mean when you're more experienced, things are quicker, or you're able to discern, or what do you mean exactly by that?
I think perhaps discern is the key. And I think that as communicators who have got a lot of experience, you realise that there are times in your career where there's like a light bulb moment of how to manage time. I remember when I was working at WorkCover, I met a communicator who we were working with, who was also a contractor, and she had a dashboard system, and she used highlighters, and I took that on, and that's how I've used my time in a work situation. And I think there are probably other people who have had similar situations where they've taken on ways of managing time through their work, and that's been of benefit.
Great. Okay, great suggestion. I like the idea of boxing time and putting highlighters in and, working out priorities. Thanks, Alicia.
Yeah.
What about others? How do you manage time? And it also may be just how do you count time? Like, are meetings timed? Do you try and balance same amount of time at home as at work, or, how do you guys approach managing time? Or feel free to add something in the chat box. Yeah, hi, Nicole.
Hi, Heidi. I definitely agree with Alicia. It's all about priorities. When I was doing a course, a project management course, I think it was probably over a decade ago, I got a tool that I still use to this day, especially at work. And it's one of the time management tools where you actually block out chunks of time for work, for meetings, for lunch, for even for hiccups or those things happen during the day, and I used to block out 100% of my time, which then meant that those hiccups couldn't be managed, or that I was working late hours to try and fit it all in. But what I started to do, which is what the course told me to do, and I didn't listen, was blocking out about 60 to 70% of time for work and for people and for meetings and things like that. But then having that buffer so that if things did happen and it hit the fan, that we had the time to go with that and make sure those were fixed.
I love that. And I think it might have even been the PEP program. Was it the performance, whatever it was, efficiency
that
program?
Sounds
yeah, because they really advocate that. And it's a great way if you're into batching time. But I love that it is about thinking about not everything can be scheduled and there's going to be unexpected things.
Yeah, and it also made you think about your priorities. I would do it at the end of the week for the next week, so that my day wouldn't get blocked out without me knowing, and I could, understand where things were, but also that I could put the people stuff in as well. Like my people, my team are priority. So making sure that they are in there and that time is dedicated, to the one-on-ones or the team meetings or even just the quick 10 minutes where necessary. So making sure that they were there. And in the life part of things, I think I'm very structured at work, but in life, we were doing too much for everyone and ourselves. And we decided a few years ago just to get rid of the things that aren't important. Stop trying to do everything and do the things that you love.
Right. Oh, I like that a lot. And how did you choose? What are the things that you love?
It was more about things that made us happy, that we kind of looked at the long term as well. So it wasn't just about what we were doing this week, whereas I would look at that, at work, but it was about where do we want to be in 3 to 5 years' time, and how are we going to put in those either holidays or I've just seen a question come up about self-care, and that was definitely lacking in life. So when you kind of put it all out and say, okay, well, what are we doing and what do we want to do? Self-care was a huge thing that was not on the picture at all. So definitely huge changes around that.
Yeah, great insights and great self-awareness. Thank you for sharing. And I'd love to hear from each of you in the chat box below. If you could just type, how much time do you allocate each week to your self-care? So pop an answer in the little chat box for me. Just out of interest, how much time do you allocate each week to self-care? One of the people that emailed in some questions said maybe an hour on the weekend if they get to it. Otherwise, family priorities can sometimes take over. So that was from someone that emailed in. What about you guys? Yeah, feel free to pop in below any comments you have about how much time you allocate. And even in just talking or hearing from each of you, it's interesting our language around time. Okay, great. So an hour a day someone's doing. Awesome. So the language, even then, we heard Nicole saying, you know, what do we want to do in 3 to 5 years' time? So again, we're talking about time. What Alicia was talking about, prioritizing and experience, and that is, you know, experience comes with time. Prioritizing is how much time have I got and what can I fit in? Here we are, thinking too much about work, sometimes disappointed in how little time that gets devoted to meditation. And yeah, great. Okay, good. Others are saying 30 minutes of meditation, a massage every 3 weeks. Nice. Which is good for moving everything physically, energetically. A couple of times a week of yoga. Excellent. Great. Yeah. And so we tend to think in time because that's what society pushes us into, and that's how everything's allocated. I find it interesting when I go into workplace, and we've got someone else zone out every night before bed. Is that TV zoning, Liz? I can see. Regular hair appointments. Yeah, there's nothing quite like having great hair and how that makes you feel. I just wish I could have a salon in my tiny house. And, you know, really to think about how we feel about time, right? How it makes us feel. So when you were first talking, Nicole, about how you used to fill your whole calendar, when you look at that time and the lack of time, I guess, because the calendar is full, how does it make you feel? Because that's kind of what I want to challenge us to shift a little, which is to go against what society says. And this is where we start to become more masterful. And it's when we think, is there a different way to manage, right? And one that allows for less constraint and greater freedom. Because as we saw before, we want to be moving to more freedom-based workplaces. We want the culture to be free. And yet we're putting a constraint of time on everything. We have delivery dates that we have to do projects by. And now I'm not suggesting that we become totally laissez-faire and we go, oh, you know, do it whenever you get it done. I'm not suggesting that, but I am saying, is there a different way to manage? You know, does everything have to be chunked into little blocks of time? And so another way to think about it is, how is this expense of time or my use of it impacting on me and on those around me? Because I'm a real believer that we don't have a healthcare problem here in Australia, particularly in the Western world, America, Japan, right, where they actually have death by overwork as something that's written on people's death certificate. I believe we have a self-care problem. And if we want to become masterful managers, we have to take care of ourselves first. It's the old analogy of put your face mask on in the plane, your oxygen mask before the child or the person next to you. So the reason we have heart disease and issues with people with stroke and diabetes and stress is not because we have insufficient healthcare in our established modern world. It's because people are not taking personal responsibility enough for their self-care. And employers are not seeing how important it is to have a healthy, juicy, vibrant workforce. And the cost of that is literally killing us. It's killing us, we're killing ourselves, and we're killing our workers. So the mastery shift I want you to begin just considering, you know, I'm not by any means forcing anything on you, but to think about when it comes to mastery, someone who manages time is always constrained by time. Whereas if we manage energy and start thinking about it in terms of energy, right? So we need to think, I need energy to do all the things I want to do and to be the person I want to be and to show up the way I want to show up. Most of us, or many people, are running on an empty tank. So it's why we do need to zombie time, right, Liz? Because we literally have drained the tank of all the fuel, and we can only put so much fuel in a day, and we keep emptying the tank, and then we start thinking about, oh my goodness, the empty symbol's on, right? It's flashing empty at me. So I'll quickly have a bit of ice cream or some chocolate or a binge watch of TV or whatever it is, which is basically mood altering or trying to put some energy back in the tank because we're feeling flat. And so I want to start getting you to think about, if I didn't manage my time, could I think more about managing energy? Could I start looking at my day in terms of the energy that's needed and what I'm expending and what energizes me and what drains me? So most adults today, and I can absolutely say this for all the clients I've worked with and every workplace culture I've worked with, and I'm saying this as a leadership and culture consultant, but also as an Ayurvedic yoga therapist, is that I see most adults today are sleep, nutrition, and oxygen depleted. And so I'd be really interested if anyone wants to make a comment in the comments box, or hop online and have a chat about, are any of those things that you've experienced at any point in your world, and particularly in your work world? So have you ever felt sleep or nutritionally or oxygen depleted? You know, have you ever felt like my energy is low and it's taking a lot of energy, say, to get out of bed or just to, you know, get into the next meeting? So let's have a quick chat, or feel free to drop me your thoughts in the chat box about if you've ever experienced any of that. 100%. Yeah.
It's
Go.
Alicia here. I am very aware that being on call for media calls, it's fun, but you're basically up the whole time, you know, over a 24-hour period. And it's really interesting hearing your comments, because communicators in so many different roles, not just media relations, are up often after hours, after they've left the workplace.
And what's really interesting about that is, I'm sure if we did some energy scans, brain mapping, you know, and actually maybe did some urine tests and things on people who, like you're saying, Alicia, in that on-call kind of space, and particularly where that is of high level criticality, in the same way we see a lot of JMOs, junior medical officers, and people that are doing 18-hour shifts in emergency departments and things like that, is they start to get hyper vigilant. And what happens is, you know, the cortisol and the flight, fright, or freeze mechanism starts getting switched on more and more in their human body. And so they're constantly on alert, because the next call could be, you know, the bad media call, or the next emergency that comes through the door could be a motor vehicle incident, or, you know, that really needs me to be hyper alert and on my game. So what's happening is that people are literally frying their body. They are experiencing adrenal fatigue, and I know because I've done this myself in corporate land, and I can see Nicole sharing that she has as well. I'll have a look at that in a tick. Absolutely. And then what's actually happening behind the scenes physically as well is that we're shortening our telomeres, and telomeres are kind of the little ends on the arms on, you know, cellular DNA parts of our body, but basically they are part of our longevity. And so shorter telomeres, shorter life. And if we want a longer life, oxygen is the way. Oxygen, maximal nutrition, sleep, because we know that those things are what replenish us. And it's why studies show that people who do a lot of shift work start experiencing lots of health issues and actually are more likely to have premature death. And I know that sounds really doomy gloomy, but the reality is that the way we're working and how we're looking at time and not looking at our energy, it means that we're becoming unconscious and we're not consciously aware that, you know, me having my full day of 8 hours, say at work, scheduled with meetings to the hilt, and then being on call or being vigilant around, you know, being alert to that, is actually depleting us very much at a physical level as well as on a soul level, you know. So Nicole's sharing, she'd been unwell, tired, dragging herself to work before, and now doing self-care and sleep, eating habits, all of that, right? Never felt better. And you're probably getting younger all the time, Nicole, because it's totally possible, as in you're lengthening your life and the quality of what you're experiencing. So it's very real, and it shouldn't be laughed at. You know, we have to learn to think about this self-care crisis that's happening. Others are saying better eating habits, trying with sleep. Right, and we do get in bad habits very quickly. And then if we're using any uppers to keep us going through the day, and I'm not suggesting illicit drugs, although that may be for some people, but very often I see a lot of the executives and CEOs I work with are dosing themselves up with caffeine, or with Red Bulls, even with, you know, a glass of wine at night, then to wind down. So using stimulants and suppressants all the time because my energy state is not maximum and where I want it to be. And so I'm needing to look for alternative sources for that. And that can work in the short term, but it's not a long-term fix. So we really have to start thinking about, if I want to be a masterful manager, and I talk a lot about, you know, healthy, vibrant cultures, healthy, vibrant managers, or depleted, dried out, toxic ones. So if you think of a plant or something, or grass, even if you think about hay, you know, grass that's been dried out and had all the juiciness taken out, you can snap a piece of hay because it becomes crispy. And so that's what we take to work. So we become crispy with our staff and our colleagues. We snap back at people. We take offense at something that's said in an email or in a meeting. We notice a glance someone makes and we think the worst of it because we have no resilience left. Whereas if you've got a big, fat, juicy, you know, succulent plant that's able to store and hold a lot of water and be juicy, if it's nourished and in a good environment with good nutrition and oxygen and all of that, it will thrive and it will stay vibrant. And if you squeeze it, you know, water will come out of it, literally. So we want to be like the succulent plant. We don't want to be like the dried out bit of hay, okay? So it's really, really important. And so for me, this all comes down to managing our energy. So taking regular breaks, getting enough sleep, eating nutrient-dense food, which means whole foods typically. Most nutrient-empty foods come in some kind of plastic wrap. Undertaking regular exercise, and that doesn't have to be, you know, pavement bashing, crazy, hard stuff. And if what I find is lots of my A-type CEOs and executives I work with, and managers often then go and do a really hard session at the gym, or they go for their 5K run when they're already depleted. And so all we're doing is getting an empty tank on empty and trying to run then on the fumes of the fuel that's left. We're not actually got any real fuel left. And so that's when we start burning fuels within our body elsewhere. We start drawing on them. And I know myself, when I was going through coming out of adrenal fatigue, I had no female hormones and I started having a whole heap of dental problems. And that was because my body was not able to keep enough nutrition. It was starting to actually bleach it from my bones and my teeth. So that's when you know the body's in crisis. It's having to pull on nutrients from elsewhere. So we really want to start thinking about, how can I replenish my energy? How can I maintain and manage my energy through the day? So we want to have some personal breathing practice. And for me, these are critical parts of a self-care plan. They are not nice to haves, they are non-negotiables. And as a manager or leader, this is for you and your business. So for your people, are you expecting them to sit at a desk all day in front of a computer? Right? And if they go out to fill up their glass of water or to do something else and have 5 minutes away from their desk every hour, are you tut-tutting? Are people looking at them like, oh, they're not pulling their weight? Or are you encouraging, okay, everyone, break time, let's all take our eyes away, look at something in the distance, have a chat to each other, take 5 minutes to have a glass of water, walk around the block, whatever it is. Could we turn a meeting into a walking meeting? Can we all go for a walk outside, walk around the block? If it's just 2 or 3 people in the meeting, why not? Go outside, get some fresh air, allow the eyes to rest from that closed looking at a screen very close up, and getting some distance, moving, circulating energy, because we sit for so long. And that's talking a lot about office workers, I get it, but consultants and people do that too. And even when I go, like I've just been out at Mudgee working with some people who are in agriculture and then in mining as well. And all of them, even though they might be active in what they're doing, they're also still feeling time pressured and pushed and under the pump, and they might be stuck on one task. So we really want to start thinking about, am I using my energy in the most effective way? And so what we want to be doing instead is starting to tap into our unified power and to really go, so firstly, in myself, how am I using my energy on a daily basis? And then as an organization and team, are we unifying our energy? So could we be more aligned in the way we're doing things, or are we letting energy bleed out by not having that unification? Because that's what happens when people are pulling in different directions, or when the direction's not clear. We find that people start running off doing their own race, and that's when we get friction, that's when we get challenges, that's when everyone's not on the same page, so to speak. So we want to start thinking about, how can I tap into the unified power? And so this model that I'm sharing is called the UQ Powerhouse. It's I created it maybe in about 2015, 14, something like that. So I've been using it for quite some time. And it really is about aligning and having unified power of all the rooms in the house. And that way we can raise the roof higher, like we can go further. So let me just explain a bit of them to you. So vision, the first one, I guess signs that this is working and that you're utilizing your energy and power correctly in this quadrant is that you're living a life on purpose, that the business is on purpose, and that you're building some kind of legacy, whether that's for you and your children, your family, whether that's for the environment, whether that's for the people at work that you serve and care for, however that is, to really have an energy full. In this quadrant, we want to be living on purpose and we want to be building a legacy. In the IQ quadrant, to be juicy and full and, succulent, like the succulent plant and not the crispy hay, we want to have a calm mind. And we also want to have a focused thought. And lots of people think, and I know some of you have mentioned meditation on here, lots of people think meditating means emptying my mind. It's more about calming the conscious mind, distilling that down so the unconscious mind can support you. And I've talked before in the mindset series about, it's about unified mind. It's about left and right starting to work together. And so focused thoughts come from a calm mind. And it's almost like if you were out on the ocean in a boat and it was really choppy, you can't see the pebbles and the sand at the bottom. But when the ocean becomes calm and the lake is still, then you can see to the bottom, right? And so often when we're not managing our energy well and we're instead filling up our time, and chunking all that time and thinking about time and stressing about time, we're chopping up the water. We're making it not still. And so we can't get focused thoughts because our mind's not calm. So we want to have both of those working for us in that quadrant. In the body quadrant, we want to have optimum nutrition. So we want to be fueling ourselves well so that we've got as much energy as possible and that we can replenish our nutrition through the day, right? We can eat at different times to replenish energy and to give the body its boost for the next few hours. And we want to have frequent movement. And so many of us, and I know I'm guilty of it until I started using an app on my phone that alerted me and said, bing, get up. We're sitting. And so our blood is pooling, we're literally almost turning off some of the receptors in our body. A lot of people I find are sitting on their brain, as I call it. So if your pelvis is tilting forward too far and you're starting to be sitting more towards your tailbone region and slouching that way, the curvature of the spine is actually more likely to trigger receptors that are in that tailbone area that tell you it's time to go to bed, right? Because the spine's moving into that reclining sleeping position. Whereas if we sit on our two sit bones and sit up alert and either have a backrest or something behind us or a foot thing to raise our feet to shift into that position, we're more likely to actually keep our nerves and everything awake throughout the day. So we're more likely to support our body in doing what it needs to do. But frequency of movement's important. And when you think about it, have a look at your office environment and layout. Are people sitting emailing each other and not getting up to talk, right? So how are people engaging at your work? In what way is it set up? How is it encouraging healthy habits? Is it encouraging people to get up and refill your glass of water? Do you say if you're on the same floor, you can't email each other, you got to get up and go and talk to the person? Just what are the habits that you're using to manage energy at work? Because I can guarantee most workplaces, most people are asleep by the afternoon. They're sitting at their desk with their eyes open, but they're actually asleep. And lastly, the EQ quadrant, which is all around building tribe and being of service. So I like to think of this one as being a window open from the house. So you really want to be thinking of who are my high five people, who are high vibe people, who are the tribe that we're growing here, who's in the team that's got my back, who am I supporting? And to really think of that old saying that is, you become the subtotal of 5 people you spend the most time around. And research has proven you often become the same weight, have the same health problems or good well-being. You often sleep the same, you're more likely to choose the same things, you'll drink the same amount, all of that, as your closest 5 people that you spend a lot of time around. And for a lot of us, those people may not be by choice. It might be who we work with every day. And so go back to work tomorrow or wherever you are and have a look at those 5 people you interact with or are around the most at work. And just think for yourself, is that where I want to be? So financially as well, all of those aspects. Are they as healthy, vibrant, juicy, growth-minded, excited about life, financially free, whatever, as I want to be? Yeah. And if not, start being of service. Start being the inspiration. Look at ways, could I create a positive virus here at work that is a good, healthy virus? Are we going to have salad Wednesdays? Are we going to have walking meetings? What are the things we could do to start having more alignment at work and to be of more service? Are we serving our clients and customers in the best way possible? I look at Zappos and how they deliver wow to their customers, and that's one of the ways they measure and look at what they do. And next week, we're going to talk a lot about measurement. So they look at how can we be of more service all the time. And lastly, when you're getting your house in order, when all of this is starting to get aligned, that's when you start getting unified power. That's when businesses start having 10 times results. And people will look at them and say, so what did you do? Like, what was the strategy? Was it the strategic plan you had? What did you train people in? How did you, achieve this? And often it's not one thing, It's all of these little incremental things, and it's having them all in alignment, because alignment is what gets cut through. Like a laser, it will cut through metal. When we're diffused and everyone's doing their own thing and we don't have an energetic alignment, we have low frequency, we have confusion, we have noise. And if you think of the white noise on a radio in between stations, that's what we have when everyone's not aligned. When everyone's aligned, it's like tuning the station. So everyone's in the same vibration, everyone's in the same space. We're all energy full, energy rich. We're all replenishing each other. We're not draining each other. Then we start seeing real success in organizations. And it's hard to put your finger on. And people go, there's just this, recipe, and I wish I could distill it. Well, this is kind of it distilled, but how you do it and the way it's done is really tiny 10-degree shifts. It's not massive. It's starting to look at what's the energy we have here. So I'm going to challenge you to have a think now, everyone. And maybe you want to have a piece of paper and pen in front of you and either jot this down or draw the little diagram of the powerhouse yourself. And thinking about, on a scale of 1 to 4, with 1 being toxic and 4 being vibrant, I want you to first rate yourself in each of those quadrants. So IQ, your mind and calmness, body, your physical health and vitality, well-being, EQ, the people you connect and relate to and how you're being of service, vision, what you're aligned to, the life on purpose. Do you feel like you have a vision that's bigger than you? Let's have a go, and could you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 4 in each quadrant? And then rate the individuals in your team if you are currently managing a team and you're a manager. Oh, and then, sorry, that should say the whole organization, not the who organization. So have a go. Just for a moment, I'll be quiet while you have a go at just rating. And so you should have 4 scores in each quadrant, or put a score in each of the 4 quadrants. And then you might have a total if you want to. And if you're happy to share, you could just put your total score or your 4 scores or something in the chat box. Or if you want to actually come on live, you're welcome to, but it might take you a few minutes to think about that. But I would say go with your gut, be intuitive in your responses. So go body, probably a 3, EQ, maybe I'm still at a 2, whatever it might be. Okay, so we've got a 1, 2 to 3 for yourself. Okay, great. Yeah. So hopefully everyone's having a go at scoring themselves, the individuals in the team, if you have a team, and the whole organization. But if it's just you and you work on your own at the moment, that's fine. Okay. And so 3 for individuals and the whole organization. Okay, cool. Great. Good to know. Lovely. Awesome. Okay, good. And so then thinking about future, what would you like your scores to be for yourself, individuals, and again, the whole organization? Maybe in a different colored pen, or just circle it, or, some way that one's the now and one's the future. What kind of scores would you like to see in future in your organization? And maybe for now it's all 3s and that you're comfortable with that, or maybe you're aiming for a 4 in some areas, but where are you at for the future? And so looking at that, and I am mindful of our time, was there a gap between where you're at now and where you want to be? Did you find there was a gap? And what are some of the strategies or actions to help you close the gap? So just from the conversation this evening, does anyone want to hop on and have a quick chat or share in the chat box? But I'm quite happy to have you come on live. Do you have any ideas or strategies or actions, or would you like to even ask for some suggestions and ideas in any of the quadrants around how could you close the gap if you had one? And if you don't have a gap because you feel like you're already succeeding in a quadrant, maybe you even like to share that, because I know some organizations might focus on their well-being for a while and put lots of programs in place. So you might even want to share a win or something that you've implemented or done. So who'd like to have a little chat?
Oh, hi, it's Alicia Cartu again.
Hi.
Hi, I just wanted to share with everyone that exercise that I've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
I love walking and have often walked it after I, at the end of the day, I'll get out at Central and walk to home, which is like about 45 minutes. And I realised that when I was in between contracts, working from home, that I wasn't walking as much. So I've really made sure that I walk for 30 or 40 minutes down to the big shops at the end of a major road. So that certainly helped. It clears the head and it helps, with the rest that you need, so you can sleep well and just, calming down.
Excellent. Great awareness. Love that, Alicia. And couldn't agree more that often when we change contracts or jobs and depending on commuting times, I see lots of people that were once healthy that aren't now because their commute has extended. And so they feel like they don't have enough time, right, to fit things in. But I couldn't agree more about just a good, decent walk, in that I'm a firm believer in space. So in white space, green space, blue space. So I believe in white space. So in the calendar, not blocking out everything, having some space in the calendar so that I feel energetic when I look at my calendar. I don't go, oh my God, there's no space, right? Because that's when we start to feel low energy. So even if we have enough time, we don't feel like we do because it's crammed. Green space, which is what you're talking about, Alicia, getting out and walking, hitting the pavement, being in nature, whatever it might be, green space is really replenishing. And there are studies and research shown now that people going out and spending time in particular in forests and with big trees, it replenishes lots of different enzymes in the body and is like taking vitamin supplements, literally by just forest bathing, being out in the bush or the forest. And then blue space, I really believe in, which is space to do blue sky thinking, to dream a bit, right? To have some imagination, to think about what Walt Disney always talked about, that imagination time and creative time. And so, space, energy. Do I have the energy at the end of the day for blue space? Am I creating space for that to happen? Is hugely valuable. So let's move on, because I'm really conscious of time and that we're coming to the hour, and I like to try and keep these on the hour. So lastly, I just wanted to sort of share, and this one has been a bit personal, I guess, in thinking about how you master your time and your energy, but really coming from the space then of how do I serve others and how do I shift that? So when we're talking about juicy, healthy, vibrant managers, people who have plenty of energy to do all the things and be the person that they want to show up as each day, they typically create more freedom-based cultures. And we saw this before. So if you look at it, a freedom-based culture is where people are more empowered and where there's more engagement. So as opposed to where a formal culture has more control and competition. So we want to be doing tactics, strategies, and things to start moving us into that freedom culture. And so they might be the smallest tweaks, but they're valuable and really important. So don't underestimate what something small might be in restoring some energy to you or your team, what something small might be in releasing them from some shackles of formal or control, and thinking about how could I allow that person to know they have to reach this goal, it needs to be done, you know, for the client in this way, but let them have some freedom of expression in how they get there or the way that they do it. And am I still micromanaging, which is control, formal, or am I trusting them, which is freedom? So ideally, in all that we do as managers, we want to be shifting a culture to a freedom-based culture. And it won't happen overnight, but it's absolutely entirely possible. Now, we've kind of come to the end, and I'll talk about next week, but I did have questions sent in from people, and I think I've got 1 or 2 minutes, so I might just quickly perhaps try and answer one of those. And also, if any of you who are on the call would like to hop online or chat or speak to me in person, if any of you have got a question or a comment you want to make before we wrap around and finish out, please do. I'll start with one of the questions that was emailed in. And that is, in a culture that's really hierarchical, excuse me, and where people only do what has always been done, and where anything outside the box is unforgivable, how can I get better at speaking up and making people take notice and listen? Wow. So that's a triple banger question there. I don't know if any of you also want to jump on and share your thoughts. But I guess when I look at that and think about, so a hierarchical management culture who always does things the way it's always been done and anything outside of the box is unforgiving. I mean, if we look back at the previous slide, right, totally in this formal culture space, right, or even focused could be amongst these two, but that's exactly what we were talking about. So in order to shift these into a freedom-based culture, firstly, the rebel in me says, well, you know, apologize, don't ask permission. But if things are frowned upon, obviously you don't want to swim upstream or against the tide too much. And again, that depends on how wedded you are to that job, yeah, and how attached you are to pleasing and being easy to get along with. What I also think, though, is that when you start asserting yourself and speaking up, it comes down to how much you value yourself. And so it's in the same way as looking at our time and energy. Am I allowing the workplace to dictate whether I can take good care of myself or not? And so how much do I value myself? What others say or do is their business, not my business. So if that's frowned upon, could I have an adult conversation around, look, I'm focusing on my health and well-being right now and my mental health and whatever that might be. And in order to deliver and be the best manager and leader I can be here at this organization, I need to do X, Y, and Z. Will you support me with that? Right? To have that kind of conversation. But also, I think you can't change other people and you can't force change on them. And that's one of the things that's really frustrating. And especially if you're a middle manager and you're growing and the senior managers above you are not. I see lots of people hitting their head on the bums of the people below, you know, above them. And so what we want to do is think about, how can I continue to grow my growth mindset? Despite the fact that I'm in an environment with people with a fixed mindset. So we need to come from a place of compassion first. Compassion that whatever has taught them to be that way is, you know, why they're like they are, that perhaps they're fearful of change, and to have compassion around what is it they're afraid of that makes them uncertain about letting us try something else. And not trying to force change on others, but to look at, how can I become more masterful myself? How can I replenish my energy and maintain and manage that? And maybe that's reducing the amount of contact I have with someone like that, or managing my state or energy. I had a client today, for example, and she'd just done some interstate travel for her work and was expected to be back with clients and back on the job the very next day. And so had come in on a late night flight straight into working the next morning and expected to be bang, 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 bang after a very full on time away where work was scheduled to the hilt. And so that's not juicy or healthy. And so could there have been a conversation around, would it be okay if I started a little later, or I'm going to need a personal day the day after I get back, even if that's just to clean my teeth and wash my clothes, right? But really thinking about what's the humane thing here, and to go, I could come to work, but I'll be glass half empty. My energy and my tank's going to be low, so my performance is going to not be worthwhile. So it's starting to know our own energy and to manage that well. When I talked to this lady today, she said, yeah, I didn't even think of asking for that or setting myself up that way. And I used to do the same. I used to go to conferences in America and come straight back and bang straight into clients. And I've learned to build in buffers around things like that now for myself. And that's non-negotiable. And yes, I work for myself, so I have more flexibility around that. But I do still have clients demanding and going, no, we want you to do something on that day. And I'm like, well, no, I'm not compromising on my buffer, right? Because I know if I want to show up and be a fully expressed human, I need that because it's a priority. And I don't want to shorten my telomeres. So have a think about what else could you do in that space for the person who wrote this in. Continue growing and building your own mindset, I would say. And you'll start being an example and setting an example of healthy boundaries, of a new way of doing work, and results speak for themselves. So I would start stretching the boundaries, moving yourself into that freedom space and out of the fixed mindset. It's a bit like financially when people say, I can't afford that. Instead, start saying, how can I afford that? So I don't have time. Replace that with, how could I create enough time, or what kind of energy will I need in order to get that done? So I hope that's useful and of service to those of you at home. And that was a question from Samantha. So I hope that helps, Sam. And I will answer some of the other questions on the next call. So next topic, next time, because we are on the hour, is tracking progress. It's in the mastery, it's all about counting what matters and making what matters count. So often we count and measure things, and they can be helpful and sometimes not. And we can spend lots of that valuable energy doing things that aren't that useful. The presentation, as you know, will be uploaded within the next 24 hours. You'll be able to access it at my website, alexandriajoy.com.au/manager-webinar. There's also coaching available, and we do have the coaching clinic coming up in December. There's a 2-day workshop in Newcastle for anyone who's looking at polishing their manager coaching skills and how they can really work with their staff better. The next free webinar next week is on 12th of November. So join me again at 7:30 p.m. I'm going to end the recording now. So good night from me. But any of you who are online that would like to chat or ask questions now that's not on the recording, feel free to hang around or hop off if you need to. So thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you found this topic useful, and speak to you all soon.